Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And question for you.
Sure.
You prefer if I look in the camera? Because normally I'm like, I want to look at you when I'm
Yeah.
having a
Well,
conversation.
what does it look like? Where does it look like I'm looking for you right now?
For you, it looks awesome because it looks like you're looking at me.
Okay. And it looks pretty much like you're looking at me. You're maybe looking a little bit down, but
Okay.
if you look up a little bit, then that's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. How are you doing this morning?
Either one's fine. Everyone's used to it. So
Yeah. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here with you.
Good. Let me make sure I pronounce your name right. Rachel Tenenbaum.
Perfect.
Okay. And we're already recording. So I'll do the intro. I think I told your PR people I'll do the intro before and after separately. So once we start rolling, we'll start rolling.
Figured as much.
Okay. All right. So are you ready? Do you have any other questions for me?
No. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so. We'll,
Okay.
we'll find our way.
Perfect. Happy to be here.
All right. So welcome to the show, Rachel.
Hi, Leah. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here. There's a lot I want to talk about today. And in particular, I want to get out of the way kind of this big title that you have, because I think it intimidates some and other people think, wow, that's a really important title. This neurotransformational coach. Anytime people talk about the brain or neurology or neurolinguistics or anything like that, there's this association, I think, that happens. So why don't you tell us what you do?
Essentially, the way I like to dumb it down, if you will, is I help people. I basically give people a user's manual to their brain as much as possible. So I help people understand their brain so it doesn't feel like it's something separate from them or this thing that takes over and that they have no control over, but rather, okay, great. In times of anxiety, these are things that you can do. This is what's happening on a cognitive level. This is what's happening with the chemicals in your brain. And this is how you can calm those chemicals down. So it's both a way for people to understand what's going on and have access to tools to navigate those situations and maximize their capacity and their capabilities.
Okay. So how did you learn to do what you do? What is your background and training, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with a general certification in coaching with CTI, which is a wonderful program. And then from there, I went through Be Above, which is where I get that designation, neurotransformational coaching. So it was about a year-long plus process in addition. And then there are other certifications that I've done along the way, training in NLP, and a bunch of other things that I just kind of like pick and choose and add in to enhance what I know. And obviously tons of books and research. So all of that.
Okay. Our podcast has really been finding its way in the past. Well, season one, we had a lot of great guests, and this is the start of season two, the beginnings of season two. And I want to make sure that we stay with the integrity of how this podcast has been kind of morphing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And part of that is getting to the process of who you are as opposed to the label that you carry. Because, especially for a person like yourself, who's a coach, who works in leadership, who works in, training people and inspiring people, working with the brain and mindfulness and so forth. What is your background? Who are you beyond all of those titles?
Who I am, I would say in some ways is very different than my background, right? So this feel like two different questions at times, but background is, in the essence is ever since I was a child, I wanted to support people. Like that was my goal. I remember when I was 8 years old, I was interviewing pediatric oncologists because I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. I was reading these books by Laura McDaniel, and they were portraying these characters, the books, the doctors, as sterile figures that were addressing the cancer, but not the whole person. And there was something in me at that time that said, I want to do that, but I want to address the whole person, the whole individual. Fast forward through life, and for a number of reasons, I got off my track in a lot of ways of wanting to do that. I did what made sense. And around the age of 27 and until my 30s, or actually until 30, I had to take a hard look at my life because I went through a period of time where I broke up with the person that I was certain I was going to marry. Within 3 weeks, my father got cancer, stage 9 prostate cancer. My grandmother got cancer, and I wound up in the hospital.
Mm.
And not to mention all of the immense stress that I was dealing with at work in New York. And it really required that I take a step back and say, what is it that I want for my life? And what is it that, why am I so dissatisfied? And so that I could really pivot and realize that so many of the reasons why I was driving after what I was driving after weren't authentic and it was to please somebody else. It was for prestige. It was for so many other reasons that weren't at the core of who I am and what it was that I wanted to be doing. And so I did a shift. And I took a lot of my experience through the corporate realm and New York to say, hey, look, I want to make some shifts in leadership. Like, what's one way in which we can create the greatest impact? And it's if we work with leaders, if we shift the dynamic of what leadership is and that conversation, it can transform millions of lives.
All right. So it sounds like that when you came to that point of understanding maybe potential loss and stress yourself going through the family situations, that you had to take a double look at how you were functioning and what you were doing with yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember walking down the streets of New York and constantly being in a stressed out state and then realizing nobody's doing anything right now. You're walking down the streets of New York. All the stress that's happening right now is existing inside your head. Mm. It is, you are creating it. There's nothing going on right now except.
And why do you think you created that?
I think for a number of reasons. I think there is a part of me that was always that way, that always believed I needed stress in order to move me forward. I know also I experienced leadership that led through fear. And so that programmed me in a certain way to constantly be on alert, to constantly be thinking about what could go wrong. So I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning on my emails, trying to check, double check, try to do everything to make sure that all of my T's were crossed, all of my T's were crossed, all my I's were dotted. And I realized that while those things can exist, I can exist separate from that. I don't have to be reactive to that. I don't have to buy into that. I can choose to respond and be response able instead of reactive.
Right. So many people are reactive. And you mentioned a very important word, of course, which is the fear-driven way our society operates and functions. From, it's not just in the media, it's across the board. You know, we have this fear impetus that leads us to do most of the things that we do. You know, most people are working their certain jobs because they're afraid of the healthcare system, or they're afraid they're not going to have enough, or they're afraid of who's going to think what about them and their family's going to disown them. You know, so many things are driven by fear. And so I hear that you really like to thrive in the leadership arena, working with leaders. And I think on your pitch or your website or somewhere, it said high achievers. What distinguishes for you a person who you will work with, whether they're a high achiever or just a person who wants to be alive? Is there something wrong with that?
No, for me, that's somebody who wants to be alive is in a lot of ways a high achiever, right? For me, I want to work with those who genuinely care about their impact, whether it's their impact on themselves or their impact on those that are around them, rather than, you know, there are people who will come and say, hey, I hear you're wonderful. Can you fix me? And I'm just miserable. And it's like, no, it's not my role to fix you. I'm here to support you, but you have to want to show up and do the work. And that is, for me, anybody who wants to show up, who wants to do the work, who realizes that any given time, we are all having an impact, always.
Yeah.
Through our words, through just showing up and having a presence, or not showing up and not having a presence, we are having an impact. And the more that we realize that we're always having an impact and want to take ownership over that, and want to say, oh, okay, instead of that being a responsibility, that's a privilege. How do I want to use that? How do I want to harness it? Those are the type of individuals that I love working with.
Who do you find your most challenging individuals?
I don't know about challenging. I would almost say I have fun with people who are very much similar to me in that type A mentality. I have an incredible client whom I adore. And when we first started working together, she's like, I know I want to work with you and I refuse to meditate. That was one of her first intros. And you know this, you're an insight timer, you know the value of meditation. And so instead of forcing it down her throat, I let her come to it on her own. And for a year, there was, without even my bringing it up, it was, I'm not meditating. I know what you're going to say. I'm not meditating. And now she is.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a gift and that's a lot of fun. And so I wouldn't say it's difficult, but people that are type A, that are go, 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 I get it. I lived in New York for 8 years. That was very much ingrained in who I was. I pride myself on being an octopus, right? I was called an octopus because I was doing 8 things at any given time and I was doing a lot, but I wasn't intentional. And I also realized the detriment that caused to my life. And again, it's about the whole person.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things that, hopefully people are coming to understand about themselves and the world, especially through the pandemic and all the changes, is this identity that we've had of achievers and type A as it being a positive or productive or higher kind of state, even though we kind of, poke it down at the same time as we're raising ourselves up by, claiming all these things we're able to do and we have to be, but really what it is, it's based out of survival mode and necessity and an ego state that's that's covering our sense of shame, and it's like, we don't feel good enough to just be who we are without doing 100 things at one time. And when you walk around the streets of New York, there's a certain vibe that, can energize anyone, I think. It certainly has me, and it's also certainly turned me off. I get exhausted now just thinking about that life, and the people who still strive to be that kind of person, to identify with that type A and with the busybody and with the overachiever type. I think we're coming to learn through this season of difficulty that we've all had globally that, what are we doing? And that's not attractive. That's not necessary anymore. There's no value in that that's greater than any other value in the world, besides your precious time. And
exactly.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And for when people begin to realize that and realize that they're not a machine, and by the way, machines break down, right? They don't function well all the time, but oftentimes people believe that they are machines and they have to work like a machine. And then that's what they're striving for. And that's exhausting. And again, no personality, no life, nothing outside of like, okay, your function is to do this and that is it. And is that how you want to spend your time? Is that how you want to spend your, as you say, like your precious time here on earth? And I think that when people really take a step back and are willing to take that pause and to reflect, the answer is no, but they don't know how to do it in any other way. And New York, to your point, part of the reason why I wanted to step away, I was just there this weekend, and of course I loved it and it was wonderful and it was nourishing in many different ways, but there was this constant need for more, constant need for a better title, a better apartment, and it's just like everything it's about chasing the better. And there's no ability to pause and really enjoy the moment.
Yeah. Well, you can, but you have to be very intentional about it and find the place to do it. Yeah. But the whole vibe is definitely, more.
And it feeds off of one another.
Yeah, it does. Where are you located now?
I'm currently in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, you're in Denver. Okay.
Yeah, I'm splitting my time between Denver and Steamboat.
Okay.
I love the mountains. I need nature.
Yeah, I hear you.
But you're based in LA, correct?
No, I'm actually still on the East Coast. Yeah. But
really?
Not in the city. Yeah. I moved
to
nature.
Where?
Also. In New Jersey, near the Delaware.
Nice.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Yeah, it is nice. It's nice for now, for sure. Yeah. Well, back to our conversation. I want to talk a little bit about this reactive nature of people, and that knee-jerk reaction. People are very familiar with that term, but I think the reactivity that goes on as, again, a cover-up for our discomforts inside of ourselves, our protection mechanisms, all the things that happen. When you're working with clients, I'm assuming you work more one-on-one, or do you do group coaching?
Do a little bit. I do different things, but the majority of my work right now is one-on-one, but then I also do some corporate work.
Yeah.
Corporate program.
So what do you find most effective for people who have like an automatic react mechanism in place? Whether it's defensiveness or fear or anger or bitchiness or whatever it might show up?
We look at it. I mean, the people that come to me and that have those tendencies are at least aware enough to know that it's not effective, right? They're willing to shift it, and they're willing to say, okay, this is not getting the results that I desire, and which requires that we dig in, and we actually dig into what are the unconscious drivers of that behavior. And when we start to look at it, I have a phenomenal executive who's doing amazing things, and what drove his reactivity when he really looked at it at the end of the day was that he felt like he didn't belong. And he had his own imposter syndrome. And so it was his muscling to try and prove his validity and his worth, kind of like, how people hide behind the titles that you were talking about at the beginning, right? That was his mode. And when he was able to start to rewire that and acknowledge that that was what was actually driving him in that moment, he could take a step back and to look at it and say, okay, how do I want to shift how I'm behaving in this moment? And that requires, for me, a lot of it is mindfulness, is first having that awareness and being able to pause and to take a step back. If all you do in a moment is to take a deep breath, to take a pause, right? That's a space between stimulus and response. It offers a myriad of other opportunities to respond in a different way. That's where the power lies. And so training, even just at first, to say, okay, great. For right now, I want you to acknowledge it. I want you to just notice when you feel triggered, what do you feel in your body? Begin to be more aware, because oftentimes our body, our body's aware before our brain is.
Right.
And if we can become more intentional with what's happening beneath the neck, we can short circuit that jump off the deep end, that reactivity. And then we can take a pause, and then we can redirect.
Yeah. I think that's all great suggestions and input and advice. I think for a lot of people, it's difficult, though, to get to that next layer of what's causing the reactivity. I mean, the first step in my book is also acknowledgement, so it's an important step. I think the difficulty for people is to, okay, if I acknowledge it and what is it, then to actually do something about it. And unfortunately, my belief is there's a lot of mental health advocates that are therapists and psychotherapists and psychiatrists and groups, and all those things are wonderful. And there's a lot of coaches, and there's a lot of healers. There's a lot of people in place, supportive people. The problem is our whole system, especially as more people come to this field of the healing work field. One, people aren't focusing enough on emotional health. And two, the price points are just driving up and up and up and up. I feel like I charge a lot for a session. I look at other people who've been doing this for half the time that I've been doing it, because they've come into this and their expectations, so forth. They're charging 3 times what I'm charging. And it's important. It's just like other healthcare. So my passion is to help people. And one of the reasons I do this podcast, this is free information for people,
Right,
is to help people find access to support that they can afford, that is sustainable within their lifestyle, so that they can begin to uncover the thing that's underneath the acknowledgement and why it's there, and not just why it's there, but then taking ownership of that and actually working through that. And it's a really big challenge. We look at the diversity of our world, and especially right now, gas prices are going up. People are being asked to return to their jobs. People don't want to work because they're not getting paid the right value. And there's this division that's happening more and more, even in the healing world, I find, even in the world of people who are able to hire a coach like yourself or go to a healer or what have you, versus those who are not. And I'm curious of what your take is on that, like how you position yourself, or where you think all this has the potential to go, if you've had any thoughts about it at all.
No, I was actually having a conversation about this yesterday. And I think what I'm really excited about is there are great organizations out there. I would say BetterUp is one of them, where they are offering coaching at like drastically lower rates than what is the norm that is out there, even the average or the low average. And it is making it accessible. It is on a larger scale. So I am really appreciative of the organizations that are scaling it. I think at one point, somebody was saying, wow, like the coaching world's getting really inundated. And my answer is like, amazing. Like, imagine if everybody had a coach, and imagine if it were at a spectrum, right? And so that there are more and more coaches that are out there that are amazing, that can support every demographic. For me, I try to give back in different ways. So a good portion of what we make from I Am Living goes to nonprofits that empower others on a variety of different levels. So one of the organizations that we supported this last year is the YWCA. And they are all about supporting women who need to go back to work and don't have any place to put their children, right? And so there is an entire program so that those women can learn, can grow, can do that. And then it's about also showing up and offering my services to those organizations so that we can give those tools. So it's multi-level, and I do quite a bit of philanthropic work.
I mean, I'm not presenting this question just to ask, what are you doing?
What are doing? Yeah, but
I'm just saying, like, what are your thoughts about the disparity and the divisiveness that's going on in the healthcare and the support care, I guess I'll say.
Yes, that to me is it's really hard to digest, and it is, and the reason why I guess that's where I went. It's like my response is, what can I do? Like, what's the thing that I can do to shift the needle?
Right.
And I also work with, one of my clients is a social worker who specializes specifically in those that don't have the financial ability, and government does support it. Right. So I don't have the answer. I wish I did. It would be nice if you and I could come up with a phenomenal answer.
Yeah, but I think it's an important conversation, because what I do believe very strongly is that the future that we're looking at is going to be vastly different than the future that we've come from, and how we support each other is critical. And I know a lot of my listeners, some of them have come to me for work and have gone to other people for work, and some people can't afford it, and some people have plenty of resources and not enough interest, so there's always going to be the diversity amongst our civilization, of course. But I think the conversation of how, especially leaders who are working with leaders, how we can support others feeling like they can contribute and participate. Like when I do my Insight Timer Lives, I always make a point to tell people, if you can't do a financial donation, pay it forward in some other way, by sharing or encouraging someone, or, what have you. And we know all this language about how we can pay it forward and so forth. But I think we really forget of how we can contribute and make an impact, no matter who we are, what role we play in our lives, and also what means that we have, financial means, because there's just a lot that can be supported. So I just want to bring up that conversation.
And to your point, there's so many things that we as a society, like as an individual, right, within society, can do on a consistent basis. From a simple smile, right? This is not the healthcare, that's not the conversation, but a simple smile, when you say pay it forward, can transform somebody's day. Right? Having a listening ear, being willing to be that support, to listen and to work with yourself, just to be able to get out of your own head so that you can be present with somebody else.
Right.
And just to hold space.
Yeah.
Right. And if more of us were doing that, and that was more of the conversation, that is, I'm not saying the start, but it is a start.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to see some of these on social media. I think one of the best things about it is supportive groups of people that can collaborate and feel part of a community and encourage one another, and even that is life-saving for some people. And there's also some really great ideas, some people that can afford ongoing healing work, therapy work, training work, coaching work, whatever, that's quite a privilege. And then other people, we have to be resourceful kind of in a way. And there's a lot of content out there, and there's a lot of people that have great ideas and are very encouraging. And even those things are important and powerful. So I guess I just want to say, for anyone listening, I think sometimes I get hyper aware of people listening and wanting more access to their own growth work, but feel stymied because either they've tried so many different things and they're exhausted and frustrated and broke, or they don't have the resources, or they don't know the right people to go to. So I think just opening up that conversation is really helpful. So
Yeah,
thank
absolutely. It's
you. Yeah.
critical. No, thank you for having my brain start to percolate a little bit more in that arena as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine too. So you have, is it a program called I Am Living, or what is that part of your work?
I Am Living is the company.
It's the company. Okay.
Yes. I Am Living is the company. It stands for Intentional, Abundant, Mindful Living.
Okay, great. And within that company, you work as a coach, or is
I
there
work
other
as a coach, a facilitator, yes. And then I'll do some collaborative work as well. So, but everything runs through I Am Living, yes.
Okay, great. How did you come up with that name?
I was playing around for a very long time. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to call it and what would give it the energy that I wanted. And at the time for me, I am, and it still is such a powerful phrase. And there's anything that you can put behind it, right? And it will dictate your day,
Right.
and dictate how you see yourself in that moment or for a lifetime. And so the idea was I am, and I had to put something else there. So it's I am living, right?
Mhm.
It's about living, thriving, really claiming life. But I am in this moment sad. I am alive. I am, what is it that you want to be creating for yourself and doing so?
Yeah. Well, I know for me, kind of change the topic. I know people look to leaders in their fields as all knowing, all together. They've got it figured out. They have the answers. And so, in that same vein of getting to know who you are, I want to learn from you. What are some of your challenges now? What are some of your either triggers, your inner child challenges, your insecurities? What are you challenged by personally in your life?
Absolutely. Hmm. I'd say one of the things that I am currently working on is, there's a couple, so I'm trying to
Yeah,
choose which
that's okay. You can say them both.
which to dive into. I think we all deal with I am not good enough in different ways, or I am not worthy enough. There were some things that were said to me when I was younger. My father was a wonderful man in many, many aspects, and he dealt with depression and anger issues.
Mhm.
And he did the very best that he could with what he had. And he was raised with a lot of mental abuse. And so sometimes that translates. And so there were a lot of things that were said to me as a child or when I was a teenager that I have continued to work, but then still see little threads that continue to just be there. I think a lot of my drive when I was in New York was to try and either access love or prove that I was good enough.
Mhm.
And one of the things that, one of the impacts for me as a child was like fighting my voice. Like there was always this fight for me to try and want to have a voice, but consistently be quieted and to be told the world's going to make you pay for who you are. A lot of different things that I really, at the time, took to be the world is going to make me pay for who I am.
Mm.
And so, in that, as I do the work that I do for others, for me, a lot of it is no, I'm deserving of the entire life that I want, not just some of it, but all of it. And I want to show up. And the more that I show up and own my voice, the more I can actually support others. So that's some of it. The other that I was going to share is through that very strong human being and character. And so in the past, that would intimidate me, right? And that would have me recoil. And so knowing when I get reactive or defensive, and sometimes it was literally pushing back, even as a child, it was, well, I don't want to recoil and just shut down, so I'm going to fight back. And so noticing where I get activated based on that type of energy and taking a deep breath so that I can be more responsible myself and be more in relationship with whomever that human being is.
So you're saying for strong characters, is that what
I would say so. Yeah. I mean,
particular kinds of personalities?
Particular kinds of personalities that remind me of individuals that were influential in my life earlier in life, including my father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you mind if we go a little deeper with all this?
Not at all.
Okay. One of the things I notice with most people is when we start sharing who we are, that, and maybe you can help us understand this, but I'm going to also reflect back because you did this as well, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe you can help us understand the brain about this. Is when we are sharing who we are, even in the smallest, subtlest ways, we still make accommodations for or hide behind things so that we don't reveal the true, raw feeling of what it is.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is, one of the phrases that many of us use is, I think a lot of people struggle with this. And when we're not talking about a lot of people, the question was, what are you struggling with? Right. And so we hide behind, I'm with a lot of people, instead of just the I am. And I'm not criticizing you. I'm just revealing this for all of our listeners, that depth and that raw authenticity of, I feel unworthy. I'm still struggling with feeling loved. It doesn't matter if there's a million people that are struggling to feel love or not. Who am I? And the other thing that we do is, we make those accommodations and those justifications for the people who raised us, which, in a grand conversation and scheme, I think I think two things going on. We want to make sure that others don't think our parents are monsters and evil people. And we have such a loyalty to them, as children, and as, from the bloodline and so forth, that we don't want to knock them off of that hierarchy that we have in our subconscious about who they are. And of course, there's, a general kind of nicety, I think we all do, of just going, oh, she's a great person. And also she stole my dog, you know what I mean? like we kind of keep building the story so that everybody knows, okay, they're not a monster, but they did this monstrous thing. And people don't always do monstrous things. So having said that, what do you think about those defenses and posturings that we do to protect ourselves?
Well, I can only speak from me, right? And this one also, I'll speak from me versus all of us, in line with what you're saying. For me, I had so much anger towards my father.
Yeah.
Just frankly, quite frankly, at one point when I was in college, wrote a letter saying he had he didn't have financial obligation towards us as children. And he didn't have a need to see us, and had it signed by lawyers. And he was, again, had that aggressiveness towards him. I'd be 13, he'd be angry. We'd be at a restaurant. He'd be yelling at me, and across the restaurant, he'd throw a plate and walk out and leave me. So I dealt with different things. I know for me, part of the all is because, yes, I dealt with that. And at the same time, I know that there are others that have dealt with much worse. And so my brain is sort of holding that space for not wanting to make my situation woe is me. And also I had so much anger. It's like, I almost want to cry, because it's like for the little girl that experienced everything that she did, that was left so many times standing without any place to go, right? And not having that support. And the people that I did have, I'm so grateful for, because I think it's why I was not traumatized as deeply as I could have been. And that little girl had so much pain, right? It put her into a space of eating disorders, specifically because she wanted something to control, right? And she couldn't control what was going on in her life. And so for me, knowing my father and knowing what he went through and how he was abused verbally and physically as a child, there's also this holding of a space of that whole person of, he did the very best he could. It doesn't excuse what he did. And it's my role to shift that so that I don't perpetuate that in some way. And for me, when I say that, I actually do love him, not because of not just because he was my father, but rather because I got like in, I guess, the work that I have done, both through my own personal work, right? And this coaching work, it's trying to see the whole person rather than just their actions. And so seeing him and his pain and the fact that he did the best he could with what he had doesn't mean it was okay.
Right.
But it's also those experiences that for me make me who I am today and drive me to support as many people as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that answer it?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And going there, because I think a lot of people can relate. And I totally get why people do, and I do it too. And I'm not saying
Right.
I'm above this, but I do observe it quite a lot. And working in the emotional healing space, it's okay that we feel the depths of what we feel, even though other people may be suffering differently, or even though other people may have, quote, had it worse. It's all so relative, and I know that we can hold space for all the people who are suffering and empathize with the people who are hungry, the people who've been beaten down, the people who've been tortured. There is so much compassion and empathy that we can share with those people. But my true belief is that until we can truly connect with the fullness and the truth of how it felt for us, even if other people don't understand it, even if it sounds like we're trumping somebody else's whatever, it's not about somebody else. It's just about you, that we have a difficult time because we're always a little separate from that feeling, like when we're raging pissed and when we're just overwhelmed with grief and despair. We need to access that so that we can process it and transform it. And the moment I say somebody else has this worth, it's almost like saying I shouldn't feel as bad as I do. And I just want to let all of us off the hook and say, it's okay to feel as bad as you do. It's okay to have extreme anger and rage or hate at some moments for someone who hurt you, and also experience love and compassion for them. This is who we are. This is the full dynamic of our beingness. And of course, we don't want to stay in the hate space, but the anger and that feeling of not wanting to be near someone, and all those feelings are difficult and they're sticky and they feel ugly. And I think that ugly feeling, that because so many of us collectively have a shame wound, and so many of us have that shame wound, and that I am not worthy as part of who we are, we don't want to feel ugly too, because then us feeling ugly confirms our feeling of shame. And we all want to be pretty, and we all want to feel good, and we all want to be validated, and we all want to be nice, But the reality of the human nature and our existence is both of those things exist at the same
Absolutely.
time.
Exactly. 100%. And,
Yeah.
I had a day the other day where I was feeling so alive. It was actually when I was in New York. And then very soon thereafter, there was a very low moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to hold space for both.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's not that one is over the other. And why can't I just feel this? It's like, no, something else happened. I heard some news and now I'm feeling something else.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel all of the feels. We are not binary human beings.
Right.
And we do have to hold space for all of that. And I love what you say. It's like, it's ugly. I remember there was a time a couple of years ago where I went through a period of extraordinary rage. I couldn't even understand it. When I was so angry at, it might have been justified, but not for the level of rage that I was experiencing.
Right.
And in the past, I would have shoved that aside and would have been like, this is not me. Like, I'm ignoring it. But instead I was just like, I sat down and I was like, all right, let's feel the feels. Like, this is here. Clearly it's not going away. Right. My effort to try and shift myself isn't working. So let me really feel it. And I think in doing that, to your point, that's how we heal, because there was so much information that came out of that experience of saying, okay, we're going to dive in.
Right. And if we don't look at it, then we get overwhelmed by it, and then we're stuck. And then that experience of so many people, which I'm sure you experience with your clients, of I feel stuck. I can't move beyond this point. We have these self-limiting beliefs. We have this glass ceiling. We have the false beliefs and so forth in place. And some of that is mental, but mental and emotional health to me are very much connected, but so much of that is programming from our emotional states and from our traumas and from the difficult, overwhelmed experience that we had that we'd never processed. And then we just keep kind of spinning our wheels in the same place, feeling the same kind of thing and unable to really move forward. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely do. One of my favorite metaphors that I often use is like, I feel like we're born like babies, in these glass cars, and they're bright and they're beautiful. And like we shine our light. That's why everybody's like, oh my God, it's a baby. It's beautiful. And with time, society, our experiences throws crap onto the car. And all of a sudden these glass cars get really mired in the belief systems of others and in our own experiences and what we experience. And it becomes very difficult for us to see clearly.
Yeah.
Right. And our work is with time to sit with all of that, to say, okay, great. Can't see where I'm going. It's really difficult to drive right now. And that's that stuck state that you're speaking about. And when we do sit with it, when we're really willing to see what's on the windshield, then we can start to clear the way so that we can see more clearly and move in alignment with our truest selves, rather than based on all the crud from society, from our parents, from our experiences that get embedded in our subconscious, right? Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it directs your life.
Right.
And you call it fate.
Right. Exactly. So what kind of meditation do you practice? Excuse me while I'm gonna put my hair up. I've got to get a grip on my hair. It's so heavy. What kind of meditation do you practice?
I practice a slew of meditations. I do. Every morning is a little bit different. Right now I'm going through a mantra practice. And that is a part of my practice. And then I just drop into my breath. And then I finish it with a visualization, which is not quite meditation, but for me, it's part of getting into the space that I want to be in for the day.
Yeah. What other kind of self-care tools do you use in your daily life?
Journaling. Every morning I journal and do some yoga. So first thing I do is I do sun salutations. And then depending upon the state or the time that I've woken up in, I will either journal or meditate first. And that meditation for me is somewhere between half an hour to sometimes an hour, depending upon how early I woke. I've risen. And then I journal, and I love journaling. I often love journaling first because it will just spew out all the stuff onto the page, all the stuff that happened overnight or that I haven't properly digested. And when I need to in the middle of the day, I will just take a couple of minutes to drop in and to just connect to my breath and to breathe. And at the end of the evening, same thing. It's kind of like a letting the day go. And then I'll journal. I have a gratitude journal. And that for me helps me reflect on the day, acknowledge and celebrate the wonderful things, and to also celebrate the difficult moments. I love to be grateful for the difficult moments because they're what helped me grow, what they are part of it all, right? Being like holding that space for everything that existed. So those are some of the things that I do.
Yeah, all good stuff. There's so many tools available, and I know all of us forget to use them, every day. It can literally fill your day if you use all the tools. But I talk a lot about morning routines and evening routines, and similar to what you described, and just sticking to it is such a powerful, even if you don't do all the things, just that time slot for yourself, before you get into the crazies, all the million things you have to do that day is really helpful.
Well, you're either starting your day off intentionally and for you, or you're starting it off reactively to your phone. And how you start your day catapults into the hours that follow. Right. And so, I don't always get that hour or hour and a half that I ultimately would desire to carve out or hope to carve out. I do get it many days because it's sort of I call them like guardrails, the things that really support me. And I get 15 minutes right? This weekend when I was in New York and there was so much going on, I really had to slot in a couple of different 15 minutes to just take that time to both be able to be out there, be with everybody, be with the crazy that I do love to a degree, but then also take that time to take a step back before I step back in so that I can step in intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big word, the intention part for sure. I'm going to ask you two more questions. One of them is a little bit difficult. The other one is also maybe difficult, but inspiring. So the first one is, what do you feel hopeful for right now?
I feel hopeful for the fact that more and more people, I do believe, in many ways, are taking a step back and to reassess what it is that they want, realizing that the way that we've been driving in society is not the direction that will support us long term.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether they're doing it on a personal level or they're doing it on a little bit of a greater scope, I'm very hopeful. I'm part of some phenomenal conversations that are happening also to that end. And so I am hopeful that more and more of that will continue to perpetuate.
Mm-hmm. Good. And what are you fearful of right now?
The opposite.
That it won't shift and change.
That it won't shift and change, that I like to be hopeful. I don't shy away from conflict. We need conflict, right? That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. Disruption. And I do get concerned with the increasing divide of information and how that is being used to continue to mold perspectives where conversations aren't being had, right? I'm part of some organizations that are really bridging those divides to create greater conversation. So that gives me hope. Mm-hmm. But the awareness at the same time, there's a greater and greater and greater division happening, and that people are less willing to listen. Mm-hmm. That concerns me.
Yeah.
And yeah, that concerns me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. It's also part of why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Because the more that I can have a hand in supporting more individuals who at the core are amazing, but are reactive, and that reactivity creates a domino effect, right? Which has more individuals be reactive. Mm-hmm. If we can stop that, if we can shift that, and if they can model a different way of being, a different way of listening, a different way of engaging, because they're getting their crud out of the way so they can be more present, then ultimately that will shift our whole. But I'm one person. I can't, we need more people doing that work.
Yeah.
And more people wanting to do that work. But I think there are more and more individuals whom are wanting that. But that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, I think there are more people. And actually, we do need a collective for sure. And this uprising that's happening spiritually and mindfully and so forth, I think is, kind of holding that energy for the shifting to happen. And I was listening to some teacher recently. Oh, I think she's Pam Gregory. She's an astrologer and also a spiritual teacher. And she was talking about how statistically, we really just need about 1% of people at a certain vibration and frequency and understanding of consciousness to affect the great change that is necessary, because that energy is so strong, it will trickle down, as opposed to the weaker energy of the masses, that aren't prepared or aren't rising up. So I feel hopeful for that,
that I love that statistic. I do believe in that, right? Like every day, part of what I've been doing since the conflict is in addition, I do a loving kindness meditation or a meta meditation, and literally spend like as much time and energy envisioning that light and that love, like blanketing the world and blanketing Russia and blanketing Ukraine, right? Blanketing it, all of it. Not knowing what impact it has, but can't be detrimental.
Right.
And if that little bit can create just like the most micro of shifts or add to the micro of shifts,
Right.
that's all we can do. Right. And so aware again, so that comment is like, we're always having an impact.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Always.
And wanting to be a part of that 1%.
Yeah. I thank you for being here, Rachel. And for those who joined late, her information will be in our show notes, and you can go back and watch the intro. And for people who are just finding out about your work or my work, I encourage everyone to follow us on social media, get involved in our Insight Timer groups, what have you, and always participate when you can, because those are resources that are available and free. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Rachel. My dog is starting to go crazy, so I have to tend to her.
I was wanting to ask about her, but that wasn't helpful for all the viewers.
She's in a lot of shows, but she's not in the, she was hiding behind my back.
I was like, I can't tell, is it a dog or a cat? I want to see her.
I know it's a dog.
Precious.
Callie, come here. Come here, sweetheart. Someone's the kitchen construction people are outside, so she's all
She's excited. She's got entertainment right now.
She does, yeah. Thank you so much, and I will look to see more from you in the future.
Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.